In Lesson 6, we're going to learn about entering data into our tables. We'll see how to type new records in. We'll talk about resizing columns. We'll look at different date time values. I'll show you the zoom window. And we'll discuss what dirty records mean. In the last class, we built this brand new customer table, and we've got no records in it, so let's go ahead and put some records in it. Double click on it right here, and that will open it up in Data Sheet View. If you want to get the most for your screen space, you can maximize this guy inside of Access. All right, now the table will take up the full area here in the object pane. And just like other Windows applications, you can restore it to normal size right there. All right, so I'm just going to maximize it. There we go. If you want to go back to Design View to make design changes, the button's right there. You can click on Design View. See that? That's where we were before. There's Data Sheet View. It's like Spreadsheet View. In Access, they call it Data Sheet View. You can drop this guy down here, and you can see the two of them right there. All right? Data Sheet View and Design View. Design View is where you build the table. Data Sheet View is where you add data or edit data in the table. Remember I said before, I prefer building the table first, setting up the structure, then we can go back and add data to it. Now the first field in your table is the customer ID. Remember, that's your auto number. It hasn't been assigned yet. That's why it says new. That number gets assigned as soon as you start typing the first character into the first field in your record. Okay, you cannot edit that. Access assigns it. You don't have to worry about it. I'm going to press the Tab key, move over to the first name field. I personally, when I'm doing data entry, I like to use the keyboard as much as possible. In fact, I've got a whole series of keyboard shortcuts to enhance your data entry pleasure. Okay, I hate having to stop and grab the mouse when I'm doing data entry if I'm typing in a bunch of stuff. All right, so Tab to move to the next field, Shift Tab to move backwards, and I'll be teaching you little bits here and there. Don't try to learn too many shortcut tricks at once. I recommend in my videos you just do one a week. All right, I'll put a link down below to my shortcut tips. I'll teach you a few here and there as we're going along. So I'll type in myself, Richard. All right, now notice as soon as I do, customer ID number 1 gets assigned to me right there. And see the pencil? The pencil means this record is what's called dirty. All right, dirty means that the record is being edited and hasn't been saved to the table yet. All right, while you're editing this record, those changes don't get committed, don't get saved to the actual disk until you leave the record or close the table. Okay? All right, press Tab. That'll move to the last name field. I'll put my last name in. Press Tab again. Now the next column says company nah. That just means that the column is too narrow to see the whole thing. I can click right there and widen it, just like in Excel. Right? Or you can double click there and it'll resize it as wide as it needs to be to fit all the data and the title in there. You'll find there are a lot of similarities between Access and Excel as far as the user interface goes. I'll type in my company name, Access Learning Zone, Tab. And then if you want to, you can double click there to widen that out. All right, next is the address field. I'll type in my address. Now, if you want to see a bigger field, like I don't want to have to widen all of these out, all right, like that, okay? So I'm going to leave that about there because I know addresses can be big. Shift F2 on your keyboard. Shift F2 opens up this zoom window. We don't need to have it that big. Let's make it about yay big, all right? Zoom just means that you're zoomed into that field. So anything you type into here, when you hit OK, is going to go back in there. And you can control the font and change those things. I'll talk about that later. But for now, I'll just put in my address. All right, 6900 Daniels Parkway, Suite 29-122. Now, some people like to put the suite on a second line. Some people put it in an address to field altogether. I'm perfectly happy with that right there. So I'll hit OK, and notice it goes right back there into the address field. I'll hit Tab. Okay, I'm in Fort Myers, Florida, FL. It's funny because I'm watching the 2013 version as I'm recording this, so I know what to cover. And the last time I did this, I was still in New York. I'm from Buffalo, New York originally. I moved down to Fort Myers, Florida at the end of 2013. Now, talking about the state field, I personally prefer just typing in 2-digit state codes, all right, for your United States customers. Or if you're in Canada, you've got 2-digit province codes. Okay, depending on your country, your rules might be different. Yes, it is certainly possible to make this a drop-down list, also called a combo box in Access. I will talk about that in a future class. If you want to learn about combo boxes now, I'll put a link down in the links section. You can go watch that now. See, this is nice that I've already re-recorded all of these classes. I can just give you links to stuff to go watch. But I recommend at this point, don't get ahead of yourself. Just go with me. Go with the flow. If you're a beginner, if this is your first time using Access, if you have a little Access under your belt and you want to skip ahead, all right, I'll put a link down below to my combo box lessons. There's two kinds of combo boxes you can use. There's something called a value list, which is just a list of values that you give it, like a list of the 50 states, for example. And there's also a relational combo box, which it gets its data from another table. So you'd set up a second table that has a list of states in it. All right, both of those I will cover in future classes. And if you really want to learn about it now, there's links down below. All right, let's move on to zip code. My zip code is 33912. Now, if you want to put a zip +4 in here, you can. We didn't limit this to just 5 digits. That's completely up to you. Some people like to use a separate field altogether. Some people just put it together. Me personally, I don't do a lot of mailing, and the whole point of the zip +4 system is to give discounts to people who do huge volumes of mail. I don't. So the 5-digit zip code is just fine for me. I don't even bother putting the 4-digit in, the extra 4 digits. Okay? Now, if you're the kind of company where you do business only in the United States, okay, you can limit that to just 5 digits. And I will teach you in Access Beginner 3 how to set up something called an input mask, which forces them to type in data in the way that you want, in the format that you want. You could say, just give me 5 digits. All right, if you're in Canada, you guys got 6, right? You could change your format accordingly. All right, we'll cover that eventually. That's called an input mask or a format property. And again, I'll put links to that stuff down below. Part of my job as your instructor is to kind of give you information in the order in which I think it's beneficial. I've been teaching this stuff almost 30 years now, so this is kind of how I want you to learn things. All right, I'm going to give you links so you can jump around if you're curious, but just stick with me. Right now, that's all you got to worry about is just type in the zip code. We'll get to all that crazy formatting stuff later. Now, for country, I leave people in my home country, the United States for me, as blank. I don't bother putting a country in there because there's no need to put it in there for like printing addresses or labels or stuff. So just I will leave that blank. If you're in Canada, leave Canadians blank. Whatever you want to do. All right. Tap. All right. Let's slide over a little bit so we can see these fields here. You can just use the scroll bar down on the bottom there. If you don't know how to use a scroll bar, go take my Windows beginner class. All right. Website. Now, for website, I'm going to type in 599cd.com. Notice how it comes in as a hyperlink. And if I move my mouse over it, you can see I get the little finger with the HTTP 599cd.com. Why is it 599cd? It goes back to the beginning of my company. There's a whole story on the website of why it's 599cd. I'll actually put a link to that down below too. If you're curious, you can go read it. But if you click on it, yep, there it is. Pops up. There's today's website. That's what it looks like today. Okay, there's me. Hi. All right, I'll just close that. Okay. Now, email address, we're storing it just as short text right now. You can store it as a hyperlink. In fact, in my older versions of this class, the last time I did this in 2013, I did have my students save email address as a hyperlink, but I don't like doing that anymore. In fact, here's the old video, right, where I show how to do it as a hyperlink. All right, I'm not going to play this, but it causes problems. The way that Access stores hyperlinks internally, it's just a mess. And if you want to do anything with that hyperlink, all right, like you want to pull out that email address and display it some other way, you got to jump through hoops. So I find it easier just to store email addresses as text. And I will show you a trick later on where if you really want to launch your email program using that hyperlink, using that email address, you can. All right, we'll cover that in a future lesson. But I don't like storing email addresses as hyperlinks. No, please don't. So I'll type in my email, amicron@gmail.com. There's my email address. Let me widen that out a little bit, shrink that one down a little bit. Let's get the phone numbers. Now here in the United States, we've got a 7-digit phone number. That's a 3-digit area code, a 3-digit prefix, and then a 4-digit suffix. All right, so 716-555-2222. And yeah, I'm still stuck on 716. That's my Buffalo, New York area code, even though I live in Florida now, which is 239. But I always use 716 in my examples for some reason. And yes, again, once we get to that format property, I will show you how to format that with parentheses or hyphens or dashes or whatever you want. That's Access Beginner 3. We will get to that. For now, just store the digits, okay? I try to avoid letting people type in phone numbers in all kinds of different formats. Right now, the text field is wide open, so you can type anything you want in there. But for now, just get in the habit of typing in just the digits. All right, I will show you tricks later on to clean up messy phone lists like this. You can remove the parentheses and the dashes and the dots and whatever other things people type in. And then eventually, like I said, in beginner level 3, we will type in a input mask, which only allows them to enter in digits. Okay, so we'll get to that eventually, but for now, let's just type in the numbers. If you do a lot of phone calling and you want to generate a query that says, show me everybody in the 716 area code, if you got a messy list like this, it's very hard to generate that query. So you want to keep all your data consistent. Okay? I don't make a lot of phone calls. In fact, I don't even collect phone numbers anymore from my customers because I never use the phone. I hate using the phone. I can't stand talking on the phone. Okay? Everybody always asks me that. Can I call you? Can we talk? No, I don't. I was in sales for many, many years, and I can't stand talking on the phone. I don't even like talking to my mom on the phone. Okay, and I love talking to my mom. But I hate using the phone. But as far as database queries go, I'm going to show you string functions later on where I can say, show me the left 3 characters of the phone number field. And if it's 716, then do this. All right, give me the middle 3 characters. Okay, you can't do stuff like that if your formats aren't consistent. Okay, what's up next? Number of employees, 1, just me. All right, discount rate, I'm going to type in 50, 50%. Okay. Now, we formatted that number as a percentage when we developed the table, when we designed the table. Okay, just so you know, internally, all that does is it multiplies the number by 100. So internally, that is actually stored as 0.5. All right, and that's significant. We'll talk about that later when we start getting into math calculations and stuff. Next up is the customer sense field. And remember, this is a date time field. See a little calendar there, a little calendar pop-up? You can click on that if you want to and pick today's date. You can see today's date's kind of got the little bar around it. All right, click. See, 2/24/21. Or you can type a date in, right, 1/1/20. Or you could put a time in there, 6 p.m. Or you could put a date and time in there, 1:20 at 3 p.m., just like that. And when you do that, that happens. All these little pound signs, octothorpes as they're called, hashtag marks, that symbol's got a million names. All right, that just means that the data that's in there is too wide to be displayed. So we'll just have to double click there to fit all that information in there. See that? All right, but you could put a date or a time or both. All right, here's a little keyboard trick for you too. Control, semicolon, pops today's date in there. Okay. If you type in a date without a year, you get the current year. So if I type in 5/5, I get 5/5/21. It's currently 2021. Now I'm in the United States, so I get month, day, year. All right, that's based on your Windows regional settings. So if you're in a country where it goes day, month, year, which I think is more logical, to be honest with you, then that will be based on Windows. Okay, Access stores that internally as a number. It just formats it based on your regional settings. There are lots of different ways you can actually type in dates in here. You could type in Feb space 1, and it gets February 1st. You could type in the whole month name, like May 6, and it'll get it. It's pretty smart. You can type in 24-hour time, like military time, like 1500, like that, and it'll get 3 p.m. And once again, in level 3, I will show you how you can change that format to display whatever you want in whatever format you want. I know I'm talking up level 3, but remember, I can't cover everything in one lesson, folks. So level 3 is where we do all the formatting stuff. So in here, I'll just put today's date. So control, semicolon. There we go. And everybody in my classes always asks me at this point, is there a way to put a default date in there? So if you're entering orders in, for example, you don't have to keep typing in the order date. Yes, that's called a default value. Again, I've got videos on that. I'll put a link down below. Default values are covered in, guess which class? Access Beginner 3. All right, that's a popular class, Beginner 3. Now, when it comes to 2-digit years, The cutoff date is actually set in Windows. For example, I'm still using Windows 8 on this computer. This computer is a little bit older. So if I type in 1129, Windows assumes it's 2029. If I type in 1130, Windows assumes it's 1930. Okay? Now in Windows 10, they've changed that. I believe the cutoff year now is, let's see, 2049. So if I type in 1149, I get 2049. If I type in 1150, I get 1950. You can change that. I've got a separate video. That's actually a Windows setting in your control panel. I got a separate video that shows you how to do that. I'll put a link to that down below as well. That's not an Access thing. That's a Windows control panel thing. And you might want that number to be different based on whether you are a pediatrician or a geriatric doctor, right? Your 2-digit year might be based on the birthday of your patient. So depending on what you get more of, you might want to change it. The best way to handle that problem, if you're not sure, just stick to typing in 4-digit years, honestly. Next up is credit limit. I'll type in 2,000. Notice I've got dollars because I'm in the U.S. Again, that's a regional setting. Next up is active. That's our yes, no value, right? You can use your mouse and click on it. And again, like I said, I hate having to stop and grab the mouse when I'm doing data entry. I just want to fly out my fingers on the keyboard. Spacebar will toggle that on and off as well. Okay, so you just use the spacebar. Tab. Next up is the notes field. You could type pretty much as much information as you want in a notes field. 65,000 or so characters. That's a lot. All right, 64K worth of data, kilobytes. All right, again, Shift F2 zooms in, and you could type in whatever you want. You know, this guy is really cool. He's a Star Trek nerd and a Rush fan. Okay, whatever. You can go for days. Okay. Hit OK, and it goes right back in there. All right. Now, while you're in the zoom window, Shift F2, all right, if you come in here, if you press Enter, all right, it gives you a new line. Now, older versions of Access didn't do that. Enter was the same as pressing OK. You'd have to do Control-Enter to get that new line. And in fact, if you're in the field itself, let's say, slide over here. Let's say we widen this out. Okay. If you come in here and you press Enter, all right, it doesn't give you that new line. Now, if you come over here, you can actually make this taller like that. You can make these rows taller, just like in Excel. Okay, and if you want to type in more stuff in here and press Enter, you see it doesn't do what the zoom box does. But you can come in here and type Control-Enter and get the next line if you want to do that. There is a way you can change that. It's called the Enter key behavior. And I talk about that in a future class. That's something that you set in the form because you're not going to have your end users working directly in your tables. We haven't talked a lot about that yet. This is just for us, right? We're the developer. We're setting up this database, putting some sample records in it. Your end user, even if that end user is you, okay, you want to work with the data using forms. And we'll get to that in a couple of classes here, a couple of lessons. We're going to work on tables first, then some queries, then we'll get to building forms. All right, let's resize this table back where it belongs, right about there. That's fine. And I can Shift F2 to go back in here and make design changes if I want to for the zoom for the text inside of here. All right, Tab. And that'll bring me down to the next row. All right, the next record. Remember, let's try to use Access terminology, okay? Columns are actually called what? Do you remember? These are fields, right? Columns are fields. That's the address field, the state field. And the rows are called what? Those are records. Okay, try to use your Access terminology, not Excel. I know a lot of you have been using Excel for many, many years, and that's okay. I know when I get your questions in my email and on the forums, you're all like, I got this column. No, it's a field. Come on, let's use our Access words. Another thing to notice now that I'm down here, notice the pencil's gone, right? If I come back up here and start editing this, look, the pencil's back. That means this row is being edited. It's dirty, okay? As soon as you leave that row, that record, the pencil goes away. That means Access has saved your changes to the database file. It's been committed to disk. It's not like Excel where you got to constantly worry about saving your sheet. All right, Access will save your data every time you leave the record or close the table. You only have to worry about hitting save, that Control S that I showed you earlier, when you're making design changes, when you're making changes to the structure of the table or the query or the form or the report or whatever you're working on. Right? The data gets saved every time you move from record to record. Now, one thing you might have noticed way over here to the right is this click to add. Okay, they added this, I think, in Access 2007 or 10, where you can drop this down and you can add new fields right here. I don't like this. All right, I don't like adding new fields while I'm in Datasheet view. If you want to add or make changes to the structure of your database, of your tables, go into Design View and do it in here. Okay, just trust me. Okay, just listen to what I'm telling you to do. Don't come out here and hit the add button out here. That's the lazy way to do it. All right, yeah, there's some real problems. Why, I'll talk about them later. Okay, so we've got one customer added to our table. In the next lesson, we're going to add some more.